Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Wildlife podcast. I am your host, Courtney, and in today's episode, we will be discussing an Australian marsupial that has evolved and adapted for a arboreal lifestyle. That is our tree kangaroo. Now, we are going to learn the difference between our tree kangaroos and our regular kangaroos, because a few of you mentioned after I put that poll on my YouTube community page that you weren't even sure about the tree kangaroo existing. So if you ever are visiting Australia and someone mentions a tree kangaroo, now you won't be confused as to how our regular kangaroos are climbing trees, because they're not. They are two different animals. So I'm so excited to be creating this episode, and hopefully you guys can learn a thing or two. But we will learn how our tree kangaroos evolved to live up in our treetops, and most importantly, we are going to learn how we can protect our two remaining tree kangaroo species here in Australia. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let's jump straight into it. This is our conversation on our tree kangaroos. Now, both our tree kangaroos and our regular kangaroos are marsupials, and they are from our macropod family. So these are our kangaroos, of course, and our wallabies. And this word macropod means big feet or big foot, which is so suiting for for the kangaroo's anatomy. But our tree kangaroos and our kangaroos do differ ever so slightly, from their behavior to their habits, their habitats, and also their diet, considering one lives up in our treetops and one would be consuming our ground vegetation. But let's start with their habitats. So of course our tree kangaroo primarily lives up in our trees. They are arboreal, living up in our forest canopies. Now they inhabit not just Australia up in our tropical rainforest, but they do inhabit a few islands and also Papua New Guinea. Whereas our regular kangaroos are ground dwellers, and they are only found on land, on the ground, and only found naturally here in Australia. Our kangaroos are native Australian marsupials. The anatomy and bodies also differ quite majorly, actually. Our kangaroos have that long muscular tail, which helps them to balance when they are hopping. They, of course, have those very strong hind legs, which help them to hop great distances on the ground. And our largest kangaroo, our regular kangaroo, the red kangaroo that lives in Australia, can leap up to 9 meters just in one leap. So they have really well adapted for this exact thing, from running from potential threats, predators, and it is magnificent to see. I think being Australian and always encountering kangaroos everywhere that I go from a young age to now, kangaroos are so easy to spot in the wild. They are literally everywhere. I think, me personally, I don't know if you can relate, let me know in the comments if you can, but since I always encounter our kangaroos, I kind of forget just how fascinating and cool these animals really are. I mean, they can leap 9 meters. That is insane. And our red kangaroos, you will typically see in news articles or going around social media, because they are absolutely jacked. You tend to see them flexing, and people from other countries don't even think they're real, because I think it's so bizarre how human-like these animals can look with their strong muscles. But kangaroos are very cool, very fascinating, and I am thankful that I get to encounter them everywhere I go. But of course, as we always mention, we have to give them space, because they have been known to be a little bit territorial, and there have been a few attacks between humans and kangaroos while they're protecting their mob, which is their group that they live in, or just you are threatening them. But yeah, kangaroos are really cool. So I'm thankful I always get to encounter them no matter where I go, whether from the bushlands to a park. They are always there, and they are a lovely animal to see. Whereas our tree kangaroos are a little bit more difficult to spot. This is due to a few things. One is that their populations are quite low, but we will get into that. But also, they live in such a vast and huge range up in our tropical rainforest, in such dense rainforest as well. Plus, they are solitary, so you don't tend to see them in big groups like our kangaroos. But our tree kangaroos also have that long tail, which can grow up to 1 meter long. This isn't to help them hop along the ground. This is to help them balance in the treetops. Our tree kangaroos also have very long claws. This is to help grip and climb up in the trees. Our tree kangaroos are very thoughtful and slow and careful climbers. Whilst they're up in our treetops, they consume food up in our trees, from leaves to fruits to flowers and also tree saps, whereas our regular kangaroos eat ground level vegetation. So this will be shrubs, leaves as well, bushes. So it does differ ever so slightly from our ground level food sources up to our treetops. One of the major differences between our tree kangaroos and our regular kangaroos is the sheer size of our kangaroos. They can grow up to 6 feet and weigh the same size as an adult human, up to 90 kilograms, whereas our tree kangaroos are significantly smaller. They range anywhere from 1 to 2 feet in height, and our smaller tree kangaroos can weigh about 5 to 7 kilograms, and our heaviest around 14 kilograms. Now, as we mentioned, the tree kangaroo is solitary. They are quite shy creatures, and they are nocturnal or crepuscular, meaning that they are mostly active during the dawn or the dusk. And we also see this with our regular kangaroos, feeding throughout dawn or dusk and on the move, which is where a lot of car hits and accidents happen between our dawn and dusk times. Now, our regular kangaroos are quite social, and this is where those big groups come in. As we mentioned, they are called mobs. We don't see this with our tree kangaroos. They are so very solitary, only coming together to mate. So they are the differences between our regular kangaroos and our tree kangaroos. So I hope now that if you are exploring Australia and where our kangaroos and tree kangaroos inhabit, you may now be able to differentiate between the two. And of course, our regular kangaroos live pretty much all over Australia, from our grasslands to our deserts and forest bushlands, whereas our tree kangaroo only inhabits our rainforests up in tropical North Queensland, Northern Australia. But let's focus on our tree kangaroos now that we know the differences. So how did our tree kangaroo come to live in treetops? Why are they so different to our regular kangaroos? So let's start with their evolution. They have evolved over millions of years. The time frame isn't even fathomable. It is such a long period of time that our tree kangaroos have evolved and split from our regular kangaroos. But our tree kangaroos can be traced back to a common ancestor, the modern day kangaroo, which roughly evolved somewhere between 25 to 35 million years ago. Now, fossils show that early macropods, which are our kangaroos and our wallabies, were likely ground dwellers, and I guess over this time period, while things were changing, while the earth was changing, animals were evolving, some kangaroos gradually adapted to climbing. So now we have our tree kangaroos. So this may have allowed our tree kangaroo today to thrive in our treetops in our dense rainforest. It may have also protected them from predators, considering that regular kangaroos and our tree kangaroos' predators are all ground dwellers. From our feral cats and our domestic cats today, dogs are a massive threat, and of course, humans. And all three of these live on ground level. Of course, humans can climb and all that stuff, but primarily live on the ground. So our tree kangaroos have a lot more safety and protection living up in our treetops than our regular kangaroos, which stayed on the ground. Of course, while Earth was changing and new plants were growing, plants were dying, the tree kangaroo may have sourced food higher up in the trees to survive. Something else that I do want to point out is that our fossil records of our tree kangaroos and our kangaroos that don't exist today are quite poor. There have been a few fossils found. There have been some in Victoria, here in Australia, of teeth fragments, which date back to our Pliocene epoch, which was roughly 2 million to about 5 million years ago. There have been some fossils found in caves in Papua New Guinea, which actually date back a lot earlier than our Pliocene epoch. But even with a lack of fossils, the tree kangaroo truly is a great example of evolution. If we want to look at how humans have evolved and other species have evolved, looking at the tree kangaroo is a really great example of evolution and what happens over a long time period and how species evolve to adapt in their habitats to new changes in our planet. So it is really interesting to learn about and to see evolution happening right there. You know, we can learn about it. We can go see our tree kangaroos. Although it might be hard, they are still there to be able to encounter. Something else that has been found is that it seemed that our tree kangaroos were actually once widespread over Australia. So they didn't just inhabit our rainforests. They would have inhabited our dry regions as well, which is really cool to learn about. But here in Australia, we do have 2 different species of our tree kangaroos. There are 12 tree kangaroos that have been discovered, but only 2 of these live in Australia. The rest live in Papua New Guinea or on little islands. But Australia is home to 2 gorgeous tree kangaroos, our Bennett's tree kangaroo and our Lumholtz tree kangaroo. And the tree kangaroo in general is Australia's largest arboreal animal marsupial. Now, something really cool about the tree kangaroo is, unlike a lot of other animals and the kangaroo, the regular kangaroo, tree kangaroos have flexible ankle joints like humans, and they have the ability to be able to walk on 2 legs like humans, which is quite rare to see in the animal kingdom. Of course, we have birds, but take our hippos and our crocodiles, dogs, cats, they don't have this ability. Now, if you're wanting to encounter our tree kangaroos because they are so magnificent and wonderful, you can find these up in our northern part of Queensland. So in the Daintree rainforest is a great spot to go for a hike, maybe stay overnight to try and encounter them. It's not always a high chance that you are going to encounter one of our tree kangaroos. As I mentioned, it is quite rare. They are solitary and their numbers are quite low. But you can also check out our Atherton Tablelands region as well to encounter some of our tree kangaroos. They are an endangered species. They are at a vulnerable level. There is roughly only 10,000 to 30,000 Lumholtz tree kangaroos left in the wild. Our Bennett's pretty much the same, which is really disheartening. And there are actually some other species of tree kangaroos over in other countries and islands that are so critically endangered that there's only roughly 50 left in the wild. Now, why this is concerning is because, as we know, our tree kangaroo resides in our rainforests and they rely on these forests. They call these forests home. Humans have the opportunity and the privilege of going to hike in these forests and camp and enjoy them. They don't call them home. Humans are taking away their homes by deforestation. They are destroying the tree kangaroos' habitats. They are killing the tree kangaroos. So this is very upsetting, and humans really need to think about the impact that they are having on their homes and the species in general. Our tree kangaroo is a flagship species. So we have keystone species, we have ecosystem engineers, and we have our flagstone species. So our tree kangaroo actually plays a significant role in capturing and storing carbon and helping to mitigate climate change. They are also pollinators and seed dispersers. So they play such an important part of keeping those rainforests where humans can go to enjoy. They are keeping these healthy and thriving, full of plant life, full of seed life. They are providing food sources for a whole bunch of rainforest diversity from our animals. They also provide food and shelter and water for local communities. So this just shows how important our tree kangaroos are, and the populations are still declining because of humans, also because of domestic animals like our cats and our dogs, of course feral cats as well, which humans did introduce into Australia. But it's very disheartening, and it's a very touchy subject when we lose our native species, and especially animals that are so important to the ecosystem, just like our tree kangaroo. Sorry, I've had to take a little break. I had to pop on a jumper because if you're in Australia, you live here, especially Brisbane, where I live currently, it is very warm. It has been reaching high 30s, so I've had my aircon cranked down, I should say, to the absolute minimum it can go. I think it's like 16 degrees. I've got my fan on 3, so it's getting quite chilly. But I would much rather be too cold than hot, so I've just had to take a break to pop on a jumper. But back to our tree kangaroos. On top of all of these threats that have a effect on their populations rapidly declining, they also don't reproduce quite fast. They have one joey roughly every 12 months, and a female tree kangaroo is roughly pregnant for about 40 days. And of course, being a marsupial, she will give birth to a very undeveloped young little joey, which will continue to grow and get all the nourishment that they need in her pouch. They will stay in there for around 300 days. Then they will start to come out and explore, still feeding on her milk. Now, males are sexually mature at about 4 years of age, and our female tree kangaroos sexually mature at about 2 years of age. But something really cute about our tree kangaroos is our females and males have been given, I guess, nicknames. Our females are called Jills, and our males are Jacks or Boomers, which is so adorable. I think that's so cute. So I just had to share that with you guys, just in case you didn't know. Now you have a bit of new information. And another little fun fact about a tree kangaroo is their fur starts to actually point outwards from roughly the middle of their back. This is important because we know our tree kangaroo resides and lives in our rainforest where it's quite wet. So the water will run down their fur as they are sleeping. This prevents them from staying wet for too long, so their fur can stay dry, which is a really quite well adapted characteristic to have, well suited for living in our rainforests. So the most important part of our episodes is how we can help our important species. How can we protect our tree kangaroos? They are a flagship species. They are so incredibly vital to our rainforest and the ecosystem. We can, if you've driven up in our North Queensland roads, especially up where our tree kangaroo inhabits, you will know that on either side of the road, it is really thick, dense forest. And I must admit, it is hard, especially at nighttime, to spot wildlife when they run out, when they are crossing. So stay vigilant, stay aware and careful. And if you do see an injured animal on our roads, please be contacting a wildlife organization, a wildlife emergency number to get the animal help. You may also want to support an organization. The World Wildlife Fund works to reduce deforestation where our tree kangaroo lives, and they also are trying to make hunting illegal on our tree kangaroos. They are native here to Australia. They are important to Australia, so it's important that we are protecting them and not hunting our tree kangaroos. And while WWF is protecting our tree kangaroos, they are not just protecting them and the trees and the rainforest. They are protecting birds and reptiles and other marsupials mammals that also inhabit the rainforest. So by protecting one species, you really are protecting a whole bunch. So you may want to check out WWF. You may want to support a wildlife sanctuary. So this might be the Wildlife Land Trust. And I know the Daintree River, the Daintree region have a few organizations as well that you may want to check out. I think most importantly, if you don't have the money to donate, which is completely fine, I think the most important thing to be doing is educating yourself and educating others, so spreading awareness about these animals. So researching yourself on our native species and on our tree kangaroos, of course listening to a podcast like the Let's Talk Wildlife podcast, and just bringing this up with people. So you may be thinking, oh, it's not going to really help, like I'm going to have a conversation with someone, but I guarantee you that person is now going to have a conversation with someone else. And this is how things spread. This is how trends happen. It's by communicating, and we can really get our message across when more than one person is having conversations about important topics, like how important our native wildlife is to Australia's health, to our rainforests and our oceans, and the planet in general. So yeah, having conversations is really important. So I really do appreciate everyone who tunes in to the podcast, because I have a feeling that you guys are talking about it, and I really do appreciate it. The message that I really want to get across from this podcast since episode 1 back 2 years ago on our sharks is to protect our animals and to be a little bit more cautious of how you are treating our animals and our planet. This doesn't mean going vegan overnight and cutting out plastic completely. It's just about being vigilant and having the thought in your mind of just choosing a better option than something else. So I am very grateful that you guys are like-minded, and I'm grateful that such kind people exist, and I'm grateful that you guys want to listen to the podcast. So thank you. But that is all for this episode. I absolutely adore our tree kangaroos. I'm thankful that they exist and that I am still yet to encounter a tree kangaroo in the wild. They are quite hard to spot, but I have encountered some in our wildlife sanctuaries that protect and rescue injured animals that then can't be let back out into the wild. So we keep them healthy and we keep them thriving to have a chance at life, which I'm very thankful for people that can do that, and all of our wildlife emergency services. So if you do protect our wildlife and you are working as a carer or an emergency worker, thank you so much. You are very appreciated. But I will be seeing you this time next week. Thank you for all of your kind words on last week's episode on our blue-ringed octopus. That was such a fun episode. They truly are magnificent creatures, and I'm so glad you learned a little bit about them. I hope that you had the same outcome from this episode. But I will see you this time next week. Have a great week, and thank you so much for tuning in. Bye for now.